Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midnight Storyteller. If you're new here, welcome. If you're back, it's good to have you. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's begin.
The hospital had been abandoned for over 20 years. The Blackridge Asylum, once home to the most violent and disturbed patients, was now a crumbling ruin, swallowed by vines and decay. Locals refused to go near it. The ones who dared never spoke about what they saw inside. Ethan and his friends didn't believe in ghost stories. They were urban explorers, always chasing the thrill of forgotten places. The asylum was their latest conquest. Armed with flashlights and cameras, they arrived just after midnight. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting the asylum into an eerie darkness. The entrance was barely standing, its doors missing, leaving a gaping hole like a black mouth waiting to swallow them. Ethan led the way, stepping over broken glass and debris. The smell of rotting wood and something foul, something metallic, clung to the air. "Smells like something died in here," Rachel muttered, covering her nose. "Place has been abandoned forever," Jake replied. "Probably just old sewage." But deep inside, Ethan wasn't so sure. They moved carefully through the hallways, their flashlights cutting through the dust and darkness. Old patient files littered the floor, yellowed pages detailing broken minds and unspeakable treatments. Ethan picked up one, the name at the top barely legible. Patient number 67, admitted October 3rd, 1984. Diagnosis: uncontrollable violence, delusions, cannibalistic tendencies. The last note scribbled on the file sent a shiver down his spine. "Do not enter his room. Do not open the door. He is still here." "What the hell?" Ethan whispered. Before he could show the others, a crash echoed down the hall. They froze. The sound came from upstairs. A slow, dragging sound followed. Rachel looked at Ethan, fear creeping into her voice. "Tell me that was an animal." Ethan didn't answer. He wasn't sure anymore. Jake, always the brave one, laughed. "Relax. Probably just the wind." He pointed at a rusted staircase. "Let's check it out." Ethan hesitated, but the others were already moving. He swallowed his unease and followed. The second floor was worse than the first. The walls were covered in deep scratches, as if something had tried to claw its way out. The air was different here. Thicker, wrong, suffocating. Then they saw the door. Unlike the others, this one was sealed shut with thick iron bars. The paint around it scorched and blackened. Patient marked 67. The warning from the file rang in Ethan's head. Jake grinned, gripping the bars. "Think we can open it?" Rachel shook her head. "I don't think we should." But as if in answer, the door creaked. The bars slid open on their own. And then, the door burst open. The room was dark. Too dark. Even when they shined their flashlights inside, the light didn't seem to reach the far corners. The stench was unbearable. And then, something moved. A shape unfolded from the shadows. Tall, thin, bones pushing against its pale, sickly skin. Its head snapped toward them, its eyes hollow, sunken pits, its mouth curling into an unnatural grin, rows of jagged teeth, too many teeth. Rachel gasped. "We need to go, now." But before they could run, the thing spoke. "I never left." The voice was a guttural whisper, layered, inhuman. Then it moved, faster than it should have been possible. Jake screamed as the thing lunged, its skeletal fingers wrapping around his throat. Ethan grabbed Rachel and ran. They tore down the hallway, the walls shaking, warping, the air filled with distant screams of long-dead patients. Behind them, Jake's screams stopped. They didn't dare look back. The staircase twisted beneath them, stretching, changing, leading them down into a basement that hadn't been there before. They hit the ground hard, landing in a narrow corridor lined with rusted doors, locked from the outside. Footsteps echoed behind them. Slow, purposeful. The thing was coming. Rachel sobbed. There's no way out. Ethan grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor, his heart hammering. If they were going to die, they'd go down fighting. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then the lights overhead flickered. A guttural laugh echoed through the corridor. The doors along the hallway started opening. One by one, Ethan's blood ran cold. They weren't alone anymore. The last thing he saw before the lights went out completely was the other patients stepping out of their rooms. The old farmhouse had been abandoned for decades. It sat at the end of a long dirt road, hidden behind overgrown trees, its windows shattered, its doors hanging loose on rusted hinges. Nobody in town talked about it, except in hushed whispers. People disappeared there. Jonah had heard the stories, but he didn't believe them. He and his friends were always looking for the next thrill, and when someone dared him to spend the night inside the house, he accepted without hesitation. Armed with a flashlight and a knife, just in case, he arrived just before sunset. The house loomed before him, its wooden exterior gray with decay. As he stepped onto the porch, the wood groaned beneath his weight. The air felt thick, heavy with something unnatural. He pushed the door open, and it swung inward with a deep, shuddering creak. Inside, the house was too quiet. Dust coated everything. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. The air smelled of mildew and something rotting. Jonah swallowed his unease and stepped deeper into the house. Then he heard it. A soft creak from upstairs. He froze. The house was supposed to be empty. His grip on the flashlight tightened. Hello? No answer. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the second floor. Jonah's breath caught in his throat. He pointed the flashlight up the staircase. The steps were old, splintered. The railing had long since collapsed. At the top of the stairs was a hallway, lined with open doors leading to nothing but darkness. Something moved at the end of the hall. Jonah saw only a shadow, too tall, too thin, before it disappeared into one of the rooms. A chill ran down his spine. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. But he had to see. His footsteps were slow, careful as he ascended the stairs. The wood beneath his feet felt damp, almost soft, as if the house itself was breathing. At the end of the hall, the last door stood open. Jonah stepped inside. The room was empty, except for the mirror. It stood against the far wall, tall and cracked, its frame covered in something black and dripping. The glass reflected the room perfectly, but something was wrong. Jonah stepped closer. In the mirror, the door behind him was closed. His stomach twisted. He turned, expecting to see the open doorway. But no, the door was shut. And then his reflection moved. Jonah stood frozen as the other him stepped forward. The reflection tilted its head, its eyes too dark, too hollow. Jonah took a step back. His reflection did not. A slow, twisted smile spread across the mirror Jonah's face. Then the reflection raised its hand and knocked on the glass. Jonah heard the knock behind him. Cold dread washed over him. He turned slowly. Nothing. But when he looked back at the mirror, the reflection was gone. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thick, suffocating. The walls seemed to pulse, shifting like something alive. Jonah stumbled back. His foot caught on something and he hit the ground hard. Pain shot up his wrist. His flashlight rolled away, flickering wildly. Then, from the darkness beyond the mirror, something stepped out. Tall, unnaturally thin, its skin gray and stretched. Its limbs too long, fingers curling like talons. It had his face. But its mouth was too wide, its eyes black pits, its teeth jagged and wrong. Jonah scrambled backward as the thing crawled out of the mirror, its movements unnatural, joints bending the wrong way. It let out a sound, a whisper but layered, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. "You took my place. Now I take yours." Jonah screamed. His flashlight flickered once, then went out. Darkness swallowed everything. And then, silence. The next morning, Jonah's friends came to find him. The house was exactly as it had always been. Empty, abandoned. But in the upstairs room, the old mirror was no longer cracked. It was pristine. And inside it, behind the glass, Jonah stood, his mouth stretched in a silent scream, his fists banging on the other side. The motel sat alone on the edge of a forgotten highway, surrounded by overgrown weeds and the eerie silence of abandonment. The Redwood Inn had seen better days, its neon sign flickering weakly against the pitch-black sky. Emma had been driving for hours when she saw it. Desperate for rest, she pulled into the empty lot, gravel crunching beneath her tires. Inside, the lobby smelled of mildew and something metallic, something rotten. A frail old man sat behind the desk, his watery eyes barely acknowledging her as he slid a key across the counter. "Room 108, he muttered. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't leave your door unlocked." Emma hesitated. "Is there a problem?" The man only shook his head. "Just keep it locked." She nodded and took the key, an odd chill settling in her bones as she walked down the dimly lit corridor. The hallway stretched longer than it should, lined with outdated wallpaper that peeled at the edges. The air felt thick, heavy, as if the motel itself was alive, watching. Room 108 was at the very end. The doorknob was ice cold. The room smelled stale, the bedspread faded and stained. A small TV sat on the dresser, its screen flickering with static even though she hadn't turned it on. The bathroom mirror was cracked, long fractures spiderwebbing across the glass. Exhausted, Emma locked the door and collapsed onto the bed. The springs creaked beneath her weight, groaning like something alive. She tried to shake off the unease. She was overtired, imagining things. That's all. Then she saw it. The closet door. It was slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness peeked through. Too deep, too endless. Her heart stuttered. Hadn't she checked the closet when she first walked in? She sat up slowly, gripping the sheets. The air was different now. Colder. She reached for her phone, but the screen was black. Dead. Then, from the closet, a sound. A slow, deliberate inhale. Emma's stomach turned. Her breath hitched. Someone was in there, watching. Waiting. She forced herself to move, sliding out of bed as quietly as possible. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the door handle. One quick pull. Just open it. She yanked the door open. The closet was empty. No clothes. No luggage. Just a dark, narrow space that shouldn't have been that deep. The back wall was missing, replaced by more darkness, stretching further than it should have been possible. A single footprint, bare, damp, marked the dusty floor. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. Then the whisper came. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was right next to her ear. Emma spun, slamming the closet door shut. She fumbled with the locks on the motel door, her hands slick with sweat. She needed to leave, now. She grabbed her car keys and pulled the door open. The old man from the front desk was standing right outside. His face was pale, wrong, his eyes sunken. He looked at her, but it was as if he wasn't really seeing her. "You're in his room." His voice was hollow, distant. Emma stumbled back, her back hitting the dresser. "What? Whose room?" The old man didn't answer. Instead, he reached up and without looking, pushed the closet door open again. The darkness inside the closet moved. Something stepped out, tall, thin. Its skin was too white, stretched too tight over a skeletal frame. Its head tilted unnaturally to the side, its mouth stretched into an impossibly wide grin. It had no eyes. Just two deep black holes where they should have been. Emma tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. The thing twitched, its long fingers reaching toward her. Then, in a blink, it was gone. The room was empty. The closet was closed again. The old man was gone. Emma stood there, trembling, her breath shallow. Had she imagined it? No, because on the mirror where the cracks had been, new words had appeared, etched into the glass as if scratched by claws. "Room 108 is mine." She didn't stay to see what happened next. She ran. The midnight caller started as a joke. Something kids whispered about at school, something nobody actually believed, until people started disappearing. It was a simple dare. Dial 777-9311 at exactly 3 a.m., listen to the voice on the other end, and whatever you do, don't hang up first. Most who tried it just heard static. Some claimed to hear breathing, but once in a while someone would answer. And those people were never seen again. Zane didn't believe in urban legends. He had spent years debunking them on his YouTube channel. Fake haunted houses, rigged ghost hunts, it was all bullshit to him. So when his followers dared him to try the Midnight Caller Challenge, he laughed. Easy content, he told himself as he set up his camera, checking the time. 2:59 a.m. He had already entered the number. All he had to do was press call. The clock struck 3. He hit the button. The phone rang once, twice, then silence. Zane smirked at the camera. See? Nothing. Then, click. A voice whispering, "Who is this?" The hairs on his arms stood up. It wasn't a recorded message. This was real. Zane cleared his throat. I should be asking you that." Silence. Then a distorted chuckle like a voice played backward. "You called me," it said. "Now I see you." Zane's stomach twisted. He glanced at his webcam, forcing a laugh. "All right, good prank. Who put you up to this?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, Zane heard something moving in his room. A slow creak, his closet door shifting. His pulse spiked. He turned toward the closet. The door was open just a crack. It had been closed before. "Hello?" he whispered. A soft knock came from inside. Zane shot to his feet, grabbing his phone. "This isn't funny." The voice on the call laughed again. "I'm inside." Zane's breath caught. He stumbled back, the phone shaking in his grip. "Who the hell is this?" The voice turned cold empty. "Check under your bed." "No. No way." Zane's brain screamed at him to run, to throw his phone and get the hell out. But something kept him rooted in place. Slowly, against every survival instinct, he crouched down. The darkness beneath his bed stared back. Something shifted. His flashlight caught a pale hand, fingers too long, too thin, curling against the floorboards. Then, it moved. Zane threw himself backward, knocking over his chair. The call was still active, the voice now giggling like a child. "You hung up," it whispered. Then the phone went dead. A knock came from the window. Zane's breath hitched. He lived on the 3rd floor. Shaking, he turned. Outside the glass stood a figure, tall, motionless, its face obscured by the darkness, its hand pressed against the glass, leaving behind smears of something black. Then slowly, Zane ran. He didn't stop to grab his keys, didn't stop to turn off the camera. He bolted down the stairs, his heartbeat thundering in his skull. He reached the front door, and the lights cut out. The apartment plunged into total darkness, and behind him the whisper came one last time. "You shouldn't have called." The next morning, Zane's apartment was empty. His front door was still locked. His wallet, keys, and phone were on the table. His camera was still recording. But Zane, he was gone. All that remained was his phone screen, flickering with one final message. "Missed call, 777-9311. The old motel on Route 46 had been abandoned for years. The Blackwood Inn, once a thriving roadside stop, was now nothing more than a decaying shell, sitting in silence as the forest slowly reclaimed it. No one stayed there. No one even drove past it at night if they could help it. But Matt didn't believe in ghost stories. It was just a building, a forgotten place rotting in the dark, and tonight he would prove it. He parked his car right outside the lobby, the headlights cutting through the overgrown weeds, pushing up through the cracked pavement. The sign still hung above the entrance, its neon letters long since shattered. Vacancy. Matt grabbed his camera and flashlight. His followers loved these kinds of urban exploration videos, ghost hunting in the most haunted places, even if he didn't believe a damn word of it. He stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with dust and something else. Something foul. He scanned the lobby. Old furniture covered in sheets, a desk with shattered computer monitors, and a guest book still open to the last recorded name. He ran his fingers over the faded ink. The date read October 17, 1998. A chill crawled up his spine. That was the night everyone in the motel disappeared. Room doors had been found open, lights still flickering, but every single guest and staff member had vanished without a trace. Their cars were still parked outside, their belongings untouched. It was as if the people had simply been erased from existence. Matt swallowed hard. "All right, guys," he whispered to his camera. "Let's go check out the rooms." He made his way down the hallway, his footsteps echoing against the peeling wallpaper. Room 216. It was the last occupied room before the disappearances. The door stood slightly open. Matt nudged it with his foot. The hinges screamed as it swung inward, revealing a perfectly preserved room. The bed was still made. The TV remote sat on the nightstand, untouched. The bathroom door was closed. Something felt off, as if the room was waiting for him. He stepped inside. The second he did, the door slammed shut behind him. Matt spun, yanking on the handle, locked. Then from the bathroom, the sink turned on. A slow, steady trickle of dark water filled the porcelain basin. Matt's breath hitched. He wasn't alone. He raised his camera, forcing his voice to stay steady. "If someone's here, say something." For a moment, nothing. Then footsteps. From inside the bathroom, heavy, slow, dragging, Matt's body went cold. The bathroom door creaked open. Just an inch, then another. The light inside flickered, casting a shadow against the tiled floor. A shadow that didn't belong to him. It moved. Matt stepped back. A voice, low, distorted, whispered from inside. "You shouldn't be here." Matt's breath caught. Then, a hand shot out from the crack in the door. Gray, too long, fingers ending in jagged nails. Matt stumbled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. The door burst open. The thing inside wasn't human. Too tall, its skin stretched tight over unnatural bones, its face twisted into a grin that wasn't meant for a person. It had no eyes, just black, gaping holes. And it was smiling. Matt screamed. The lights flickered wildly as the room warped, the air growing thick, suffocating. The walls seemed to breathe, the old wallpaper peeling away in layers, revealing something wet and pulsing beneath. Matt clawed at the door, his camera still rolling. The thing stepped closer. With every step, the world around him shifted. The bed rotted, the floor cracked, the window showed nothing but an endless black void. This wasn't the motel anymore. It was something else. Matt yanked harder on the doorknob. It refused to budge. The thing was right behind him now. Its cold breath touched the back of his neck. "They never left," it whispered. Matt slammed his shoulder against the door. Once. Twice. On the third hit, it gave way. He crashed into the hallway, scrambling to his feet. The motel was different now. The walls were darker, pulsing, the doors along the hall opening one by one. Faces peered out. Twisted, rotting faces. The lost guests of Blackwood Inn. Their eyes were wide, empty sockets, their mouths stretched in silent screams. They reached for him. Matt ran. He sprinted through the lobby, past the front desk. The guest book was now covered in black ink, the names smudged into nothingness. He shoved through the doors and stumbled into darkness. The outside was gone. No road, no car, just an endless black void stretching in all directions. Matt turned, panting, shaking. The motel stood alone, floating in the emptiness. The neon sign flickered back to life. No vacancy. A shadow loomed behind him. A hand clamped over his mouth. His camera hit the ground, the screen cracked but still recording. The last thing it captured was him being pulled back inside. The next day, Matt's channel uploaded a new video. It was just static at first. Then a still frame of the motel's front desk. The guest book was open, and at the bottom of the list, in fresh, shaking ink, Matt Dawson. Checked in, October 5th, 2025. Checked out never. The storm rolled in fast. Thick clouds swallowed the moon, and the wind howled through the skeletal trees lining the deserted highway. Daniel had been driving for hours, his eyelids heavy, exhaustion pulling at his body. When the rain began, he knew he had to stop for the night. That's when he saw the sign. Black Hollow Inn. Vacancy. It stood at the edge of the road, its neon letters flickering in and out like a dying heartbeat. The building itself loomed in the distance. An old, crumbling structure barely lit by the dim glow of the sign. Daniel hesitated. Something about it felt wrong. But the rain was coming down in thick sheets now, blurring the road ahead. He had no choice. Pulling into the cracked parking lot, he killed the engine and stepped out. The air smelled damp, thick with the scent of rotting wood. The motel looked abandoned. No cars, no movement. Just the flickering vacancy sign buzzing in the dark. The lobby door was unlocked. Inside, a single dim bulb swung from the ceiling, casting long, shifting shadows across the peeling wallpaper. The desk was empty. A tarnished bell sat on the counter. Daniel pressed it once. The sound echoed too loudly in the silence. From the back room, a figure emerged. She was old. Too old. Her skin sagged, her eyes milky white, her hands thin and clawed. She moved slowly, her head tilting as if listening. "You're our only guest tonight," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves crumbling. Daniel forced a polite smile. "Just need a room for the night." The old woman didn't blink. She turned, retrieving a key from the wall behind her. "Room? Of course." Daniel took the key, his fingers brushing hers. Cold. Clammy. He hurried down the hallway, his footsteps echoing against the cracked tile. The doors were all shut, their numbers worn away. The hallway smelled of mildew and something sweeter, like decayed fruit. His room was at the end. Room 13. The door groaned as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was stagnant, unmoving. The bed was clean, but something about it made his skin crawl. The old wallpaper was peeling in places, revealing something dark underneath. A single painting hung above the bed, It depicted a faceless figure standing in a field of blackened trees. The longer he looked at it, the more the figure seemed to move. Daniel shook it off, just exhaustion. He locked the door and lay down, staring at the ceiling. The rain pounded against the window. The wind whispered through the cracks. Then, a soft knock. His body tensed. Another knock. Faint, slow. He turned his head toward the door, his heart pounded. A third knock. Daniel sat up, pulse hammering in his ears. Who's there? Silence. He exhaled, rubbing his eyes. Maybe he'd imagined it. Then, from the closet, a soft, slow scratching. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the rain. Something was inside the room with him. Daniel moved slowly, heart thundering, reaching for his phone. He turned on the flashlight, aiming it at the closet door. The scratches stopped. For a moment, nothing. Then, the door creaked open. Just an inch, enough to see the blackness inside. Something shifted in the dark. A whisper, so soft it barely reached his ears. You shouldn't have come here. Daniel bolted from the bed, grabbing the doorknob. It wouldn't turn. The whisper grew louder. A chorus of voices. Layered. Wrong. He slammed his fist against the door. Let me out! Behind him, footsteps. Slow, dragging. He turned, the flashlight trembling in his grip. The closet door was fully open now, and something stepped out. Too tall, too thin. Its face was smooth, its arms too long, fingers curled like hooks. It smiled. Daniel screamed. The light flickered. Darkness swallowed the room. He clawed at the door, and suddenly it gave way. Daniel stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath. The lights were different now. Dim, flickering. The hallway stretched too far, as if the motel had changed. From behind him, the voice whispered again. You can't leave. The old woman stood at the end of the hall, grinning. You checked in, she rasped, her mouth stretching too wide, revealing rows of blackened teeth. You can't check out. The hallway shifted. The doors opened. Figures emerged, crawling, shambling, their faces contorted in silent screams. The lost guests of Black Hollow Inn. Daniel ran. He sprinted for the exit, lungs burning, heart ready to burst from his chest. He shoved the lobby doors open and ran straight into darkness. The motel was floating. No road, no sky, just an endless black abyss. He turned back. The old woman stood in the doorway. Behind her, the faceless figure from the painting. It reached for him. And then, the world collapsed. The next day, a highway patrol officer found Daniel's car abandoned outside an empty lot. There was no motel, no Black Hollow Inn, just a stretch of dead trees and a signpost with nothing attached to it. The only thing left behind was Daniel's phone, still recording. The last image it captured? A room number. 13, and a voice whispering, barely audible over the static, another guest checked in.
David inherited an old radio from his grandfather, a dusty relic from the 1950s. The wooden exterior was scratched, the knobs stiff from years of disuse, and the speaker crackled with static, even when turned off. His grandfather had always been secretive about it, warning David never to tamper with the dials, but after his passing, the radio ended up in David's cluttered apartment, sitting in a forgotten corner of his bedroom. One stormy night, rain lashed against the window, and a deep rolling thunder shook the sky. David lay awake, unable to sleep, scrolling mindlessly on his phone. The room was dim, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning. He glanced at the radio, its presence strangely unsettling. On a whim, he sat up and turned a knob. The familiar hiss of static filled the air. He twisted the dial, searching for something. Music, talk shows, anything. The static wavered, and then cleared slightly, revealing a faint voice. At first, he thought it was a regular broadcast, distorted by the storm, but then, through the crackling, he heard something that made his stomach drop. "Why are you awake, David?" He froze, his breath caught in his throat. The voice had spoken his name. Slowly, he turned to look at the radio, his pulse hammering in his ears. That wasn't possible. It had to be a coincidence, an old recording. He swallowed hard and turned the knob again, trying to find a different station. "Don't turn me off." The voice was clearer this time, deep and urgent. David's hands trembled as he adjusted the volume. He was wide awake now, his skin prickling with unease. His mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was an interactive show, or a strange frequency picking up a transmission from somewhere nearby. Then the voice whispered again, "I'm watching you." David's entire body stiffened. His eyes darted around the room. The only light came from the glow of his phone screen, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He turned toward the window. The rain blurred the view outside, making it impossible to see beyond the glass. He reached for the power cord and yanked it from the outlet. The radio went silent. For a moment, he let out a breath, forcing himself to calm down. Maybe he was just imagining things, his brain playing tricks on him in the late-night silence. Then, from the unplugged radio, the voice whispered again, "That won't help, David. I'm already inside the house." A cold wave of dread crashed over him. He staggered backward, nearly tripping over his bed. His eyes darted to the door, half expecting it to swing open. The room felt smaller, suffocating. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the room. Nothing, just the familiar sight of his desk, his chair, the pile of clothes in the corner. But the air felt wrong, thick, heavy, charged with something unseen. The radio crackled once more. "You should check the closet." David's heart nearly stopped. His closet door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness peeking through. Had it been like that before? He couldn't remember. He didn't move. His pulse pounded in his ears, drowning out everything else. Slowly, he stepped forward, every instinct screaming at him to run instead. He reached out, hesitating for a moment, before gripping the closet handle. With a deep breath, he yanked it open. Nothing, just clothes hanging limply, the scent of old fabric and dust wafting out. He exhaled shakily, feeling foolish. Maybe the stress of work, lack of sleep, and the eerie atmosphere of the storm were messing with his head. He closed the closet and turned back toward his bed. And then he saw it. A figure stood in the corner of his room, just past the reach of his phone's light. A gaunt shape, impossibly thin, its arms hanging too long at its sides. Its head was slightly tilted, as if observing him. David's breath hitched, his grip on the phone tightened, but his body refused to move. The radio crackled again. "Now you see me." David stumbled backward, his foot catching on the edge of his rug. He hit the ground hard, his phone slipping from his grasp. The flashlight spun, throwing erratic beams of light across the room. In one of the flashes, the figure appeared closer. David scrambled to his feet, his mind screaming at him to run. He lunged for the door, wrenching it open with all his strength. He bolted down the hallway, the wooden floor creaking beneath his frantic steps. The house was silent, except for the storm raging outside. Except for the storm raging outside. He reached the front door and fumbled with the lock. His fingers were slick with sweat, slipping against the metal. He twisted it violently, yanking the door open. Cold night air rushed in, rain drenching his face. As he stumbled onto the porch, he turned, expecting the figure to be right behind him. But the doorway was empty. His room was still dark, the radio silent. Panting, he backed away from the house, his mind racing. He needed help, someone to confirm he wasn't losing his mind. His neighbor, Mr. Holloway, an old retired man, lived just across the street. David sprinted through the rain, his feet splashing against the pavement. He reached the neighbor's porch and pounded on the door. Seconds stretched into eternity before the porch light flickered on and the door creaked open. Mr. Holloway squinted at him, concern etched on his wrinkled face. "David, what the hell are you doing out here?" David struggled to catch his breath. Something in my house. The radio, it talked to me. And then I saw." The old man's face paled, his grip on the door tightened. "You still have that damn radio?" His voice was barely above a whisper. David nodded, confused and terrified. Mr. Holloway exhaled sharply, glancing over David's shoulder at the house. "Listen to me, kid. Get rid of it. That thing. It's not just a radio. Your grandfather, he knew. That's why he warned you." David swallowed hard. "What is it?" The old man shook his head, I don't know exactly, but I do know this. It doesn't just talk, it listens, and once it speaks your name." He trailed off, his expression grim. David turned back toward his house. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see his bedroom dimly lit by the discarded flashlight. The closet door was open again, and inside, two glowing eyes stared back at him. Ethan had always loved the sound of rain. There was something oddly soothing about the rhythmic patter against his window, the distant rumble of thunder rolling across the sky. It made him feel safe, as if the storm was a barrier keeping the rest of the world at bay. But one night, during a particularly violent storm, that sense of comfort was shattered. The rain was relentless, pounding against the roof of his isolated cabin deep in the woods. Wind howled through the trees, making the old structure creak and groan. The power had gone out an hour ago, leaving Ethan with only the dim glow of his flashlight and the flickering flame of a single candle. He had just settled into bed when he heard it. A knock. It was faint at first, barely audible over the storm, but then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks against the front door. Ethan sat up, his heart beginning to race. No one should be out in this weather. His cabin was miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dense forest. Visitors were rare, and uninvited guests in the middle of the night were unheard of. Another knock. He hesitated before swinging his legs over the bed. Maybe someone was lost. A stranded hiker, a traveler whose car had broken down on the nearby road. Grabbing his flashlight, he made his way to the door, his bare feet padding against the cold wooden floor. The house felt eerily silent, except for the storm raging outside. He reached the door and hesitated. Something didn't feel right. The knocks had been too steady, too measured, not the frantic pounding of someone desperate for shelter. He took a deep breath and peered through the peephole. At first, he saw nothing but darkness. The rain distorted the view, streaking the glass with water. Then in the dim glow of his porch light, he saw him. A man stood just beyond the door. His face was obscured by the rain and shadows, but his posture was unnerving, unnaturally still, his arms hanging limply at his sides. He wore a soaked, tattered coat that clung to his thin frame. Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't know why, but the sight of the man filled him with unease. He called out, his voice hoarse. "Hello, do you need help?" The man didn't answer. Lightning flashed, illuminating the porch for a split second. That's when Ethan saw it. Something was wrong with the man's face. His mouth was too wide, his lips stretched into an unnatural grin. His eyes were hollow, empty. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He stumbled back from the door, his breath coming in short gasps. The knocking resumed, louder, more insistent. Boom, boom, boom. Ethan clamped a hand over his mouth to stifle a gasp. He couldn't open that door. He wouldn't open that door. Then the voice came. "Let me in." It was deep, distorted, barely human. The words crawled through the door, like fingers reaching for him. Ethan's grip tightened on the flashlight. His mind raced. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Maybe it was a trick, his imagination playing games with him in the dark. Then he heard the sound that nearly made his heart stop. The doorknob turning. He hadn't locked it. With a strangled cry, he lunged forward, slamming the deadbolt into place just as the door rattled violently in its frame. "Let me in, Ethan." His blood turned to ice. It knew his name. Ethan backed away, his body shaking. How did it know his name? He had never seen this man before in his life. The storm raged on outside, but inside the house, all he could hear was his own ragged breathing. Then, silence. The knocking stopped. The doorknob stilled. For several long moments, Ethan stood frozen, listening. He didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. Maybe it was gone. Maybe whatever that was had finally left. Then came the whisper, right behind him. "You should have let me in." Ethan spun around, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing, but the air was thick with something unseen, something wrong. The temperature had dropped. His breath came out in white puffs. Then from the corner of the room, a shadow moved. Something was inside the house. Ethan bolted for his bedroom, slamming the door shut behind him. His hands fumbled for something, anything to barricade it. He pushed the dresser against the door, his pulse hammering in his ears. Silence. He pressed his ear against the wood, listening. Then the whisper came again. "I'm already inside, Ethan." Terror coursed through him. He backed away from the door, his flashlight flickering. Then the light revealed something that made his stomach drop. The closet door was open. He never left his closet open. Something moved inside. A shape, hunched and twisted, unfolded from the shadows. Long spindly fingers curled around the edge of the door. A grin stretched across a face that shouldn't exist, teeth sharp and glistening. Ethan didn't have time to scream. The lights flickered one last time, and then the room was swallowed by darkness. The storm raged on outside. By morning, the rain had stopped. The sun rose over the cabin, casting light on the wet earth. Birds chirped in the trees, but the front door of Ethan's cabin was wide open, swinging gently in the breeze, and Ethan was nowhere to be found. Lena had never been afraid of the dark. As a child, she had always found comfort in the deep shadows of her room, believing that whatever lurked in them had no power over her as long as she didn't fear it. But after moving into her new apartment, the darkness started to feel different, like it was watching her. At first, the sounds were subtle, a faint scratching behind the walls, the occasional creak of the floorboards at night. She dismissed it as an old building, settling, or perhaps a rodent problem. It wasn't until she started hearing whispers that she realized something was terribly wrong. One night, as rain drummed against her bedroom window, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was silent, except for the occasional drip of water from a leaky faucet in the kitchen. She had almost convinced herself that the scratching sounds were her imagination when she heard it. Soft, hushed voices coming from inside the walls. Her breath caught in her throat. She strained to listen, pressing her ear against the cool plaster. The voices were faint but unmistakable. "She's listening." Lena jerked away from the wall, her skin crawling. She scrambled to turn on the bedside lamp, but just as her fingers found the switch, the whispering stopped. The room was utterly silent. She stayed awake for the rest of the night, clutching her blanket, staring at the walls, and trying to convince herself that she was losing her mind. The next morning, she called her landlord to complain about the noises. He arrived that afternoon, inspecting the walls, with a puzzled expression. "No pipes run through this part of the apartment," he muttered, "and if there were rats you'd see droppings or bite marks." He knocked on the wall a few times, listening. Nothing. He shrugged. "Let me know if it keeps happening." Lena felt ridiculous. Maybe she had imagined it after all. But that night, the whispers returned. Only this time they were clearer. She knows a cold dread settled in her stomach. She tried to ignore it. She blasted music through her headphones, leaving the TV on at all times. But the whispers always found a way through. They grew louder, and then the scratching returned, not just behind the walls anymore. At her bedroom door, Lena bolted upright in bed, heart pounding. The scratching was slow and deliberate, like nails dragging across the wood. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling. The screen flickered on. It was 3:13 a.m. The scratching stopped. She held her breath, waiting. Then click, the door handle turned. She let out a strangled cry. Scrambling out of bed, she grabbed the closest object, a glass of water on her nightstand, and hurled it at the door. The impact was loud, shattering the silence. But when she turned on the lights and yanked the door open, the hallway was empty. She barely slept that night. By morning, she had convinced herself to leave. As she packed, she noticed something strange. Small holes in the wall, like peepholes. They hadn't been there before. A sick feeling twisted in her gut. She bent down, pressing her eye to one of the holes. At first she saw nothing, just darkness. Then an eye blinked back at her. Lena screamed. She stumbled backward, heart hammering. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking. But before the call connected, the whispers returned. Too late. The walls erupted with movement. Lena watched in horror as fingers, too many fingers, pushed through the hole, stretching and clawing at the air. Then the walls breathed. They expanded and contracted like lungs, the surface rippling as if something inside was pressing against them, trying to get out. A low guttural laugh echoed through the apartment. The walls cracked, and then everything went black. The next morning, Lena's apartment was found empty. Her belongings were still there, her bed unmade, her phone on the floor, with an unfinished 911 call. But Lena was gone. The only sign that she had ever been there was the single word scratched into the wall above her bed: hungry. Lena had always loved driving at night. The empty roads, the soft hum of the engine, the way the streetlights blurred past like glowing ghosts. It was peaceful. After long shifts at the hospital, her midnight drives were the only time she could clear her mind. That night, it was raining. Fat droplets streaked down her windshield as her wipers struggled to keep up. The highway was nearly deserted. Just a few scattered headlights in the distance. She turned up the volume on her radio, letting the soft crackle of an old jazz station fill the silence. Then she saw him, a man standing on the side of the road, just beyond the reach of her headlights. He wore a dark coat, his face shadowed under the hood. He wasn't waving for help, just standing there, perfectly still, staring at the oncoming traffic. Lena's stomach tightened. Something about him felt wrong. She pressed her foot lightly on the brake, but before she could decide whether to stop, she passed him. Her headlights illuminated his face for only a second. Pale skin, sunken eyes, lips that didn't quite move, but curved into an eerie half-smile. Then he was gone. She shivered and shook her head. Maybe she was just exhausted. Maybe the darkness and rain had played tricks on her. She glanced in her rearview mirror. Her blood turned to ice. He was in the back seat. Her fingers clenched the steering wheel so tightly it hurt. Her breath caught in her throat. The man sat silently behind her, his face partially hidden in the shadows. He wasn't moving. He wasn't blinking. Lena's entire body screamed at her to look away, to pretend she didn't see him, but she couldn't. The car felt impossibly small, the air thick with something she couldn't describe. Her heart pounded so loudly, she could barely hear the rain. She tried to stay calm. Maybe she had picked up a hitchhiker earlier and forgotten. Maybe she was imagining this. Her voice trembled. "I didn't see you get in." The man didn't respond. She forced a nervous laugh. "Where are you headed?" Silence. Her hands were slick with sweat against the wheel. She risked another glance in the mirror. His face had changed. His smile was wider now, unnaturally wide. His eyes, empty black pits, stared directly at her. She gasped, swerving the car slightly. Her breathing came in short, panicked bursts. She wanted to pull over, to run, but something told her she couldn't. Then finally, he spoke. His voice was a whisper, crawling under her skin. "You shouldn't have seen me." Her vision blurred with panic. The rain, the darkness, the impossibility of what was happening. It was all too much. She forced herself to focus on the road, gripping the wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. She needed to get off the highway. She needed to get away. Up ahead, she saw a gas station. The neon sign flickered weakly, but it was open. If she could just get there. A cold breath touched her ear. "Don't stop." A scream built in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The gas station was just a few feet away. She could see the attendant inside, scrolling on his phone, but the man in the back seat was closer now. His reflection loomed in the mirror, his grin stretching impossibly wide. His fingers, long, thin, wrong, rested on the back of her seat. If she stopped, would he let her go, or would he do something worse? Her mind screamed for her to run, but her body was frozen. Then the lights of the gas station flickered. The moment they went out, everything in the car changed. The air was suffocatingly still. The radio turned to static. The temperature dropped so fast that her breath fogged the windshield. And the man, gone. Lena barely had time to react before something slammed into her windshield from the inside. A handprint, black, wet, smearing down the glass. She screamed, jerking the wheel. The car skidded, tires screeching against the wet pavement. She barely managed to regain control, swerving back onto the highway. The gas station was behind her now. She risked a glance at the mirror, empty. Her body trembled violently. She didn't know what had just happened. She didn't want to know. She just needed to get home. The rest of the drive was a blur. She kept expecting him to reappear, to whisper something else in her ear, but he didn't. When she finally pulled into her driveway, she sat in the car for a long time, gripping the wheel, heart racing. She turned on the overhead light, slowly. She checked the back seat. Nothing. She checked the windows, the doors, even under the seats. Nothing. A shaky laugh bubbled up in her throat. Had she imagined it? Was she just overtired? Then she saw it. The handprint, still there, dripping, and underneath it,
A message scratched into the glass. See you soon.
The attic was a treasure trove of forgotten memories, filled with dusty boxes and old furniture. Clara had been sorting through it for hours, trying to decide what to keep and what to throw away. That's when she found the photo. It was an old black and white photograph, the edges frayed and the surface slightly faded. The photo showed a group of people standing in front of a house, their faces smiling but their eyes oddly blank. Clara recognized the house. It was the one she was standing in now, but what caught her attention was the figure in the background. The figure was tall and thin, its face obscured by a shadow. It stood slightly apart from the group, its posture stiff and unnatural. Clara couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but something about it sent a chill down her spine. She flipped the photo over, hoping to find a date or a name, but the back was blank. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The image of the figure in the photo kept replaying in her mind, its shadowy presence like a weight pressing down on her chest. She told herself it was just a trick of the light, a coincidence, but the unease lingered. The next day, Clara decided to investigate. She dug through more boxes, hoping to find more photos or any information about the people in the picture. But the more she looked, the more she realized something was wrong. The figure appeared in every photo, always in the background, always watching. Clara's heart raced as she flipped through the photos, her hands trembling. The figure was in every one, its presence like a shadow over the family. She tried to convince herself it was just a coincidence, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. And then she found the journal. It was tucked away in a dusty box, its pages yellowed with age. The journal belonged to a woman named Margaret, who had lived in the house decades ago. The entries were written in a neat flowing script, and they detailed Margaret's life, her thoughts, her dreams, her fears. But as Clara read further, she noticed something strange. Margaret wrote about the figure in the photos. It's always there, Margaret wrote. In every photo, in every memory, it watches us, follows us. I don't know what it wants, but I know it's not human. Clara's hands trembled as she read the words, the unease growing with each passing moment. She told herself it was just the ramblings of a disturbed mind, but the figure in the photos was real. She had seen it. That night, Clara dreamed of the figure. It stood in the corner of her room, its face obscured by shadow, its presence like a weight pressing down on her chest. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to move, but her body was paralyzed. The figure stepped closer, its movements stiff and unnatural, and leaned in close. You shouldn't have found the photos, it said, its voice a low guttural growl that didn't sound human. Now I'm part of your memories too. When Clara woke up, she was standing in the attic, the photo clutched in her hands. She looked down at it, and the figure was gone. But as she flipped through the other photos, she realized the truth. The figure was in every photo, but now it was closer, its presence more pronounced, and in the last photo, it was standing right behind her, its shadowy face inches from hers. Clara's heart raced as she stumbled back, the photos falling from her hands. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to run, but her legs wouldn't obey her. The figure was everywhere, in every memory, in every photo, and then she heard the whispers. They were faint at first, barely audible over the sound of her racing heart, but as the minutes passed, they grew louder, more distinct. The whispers were coming from the photos, from the figure in the background. You can't escape me, it said, its voice a guttural growl that echoed in her mind. I'm part of your memories now. Clara's vision blurred as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. She could feel the figure's presence, like a weight pressing down on her chest, and the last thing she saw before everything went black was the figure's shadowy face, staring into her soul. When Clara woke up, She was alone in the attic. The photos were gone, but the whispers lingered in her mind, a constant reminder of what had happened. She never spoke of that night to anyone, but she never went back to the attic. And sometimes, late at night, she would hear the whispers, faint but unmistakable, calling her back to the photos, to the figure in the background. The radio crackled to life, the static cutting through the silence of the night. Jake had been working late, his desk cluttered with papers and empty coffee cups. He reached over to turn off the radio, but the static stopped, replaced by a voice. "Hello," the voice said, faint and distorted. "Is anyone there?" Jake froze, his hand hovering over the radio. The voice was weak, almost desperate, and it sent a chill down his spine. "Hello," the voice said again. "Please, if anyone can hear me, I need help." Jake hesitated, then picked up the microphone. "This is Jake. Who is this?" There was a pause, then the voice returned, stronger this time. "Thank God, my name is Sarah. I'm trapped. I don't know where I am, but I need help." Jake's heart raced as he listened to the voice. It sounded real, too real to be a prank. "Sarah, can you tell me where you are? What do you see?" "I don't know," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "It's dark. I can't see anything, but I can hear whispers. They're everywhere." Jake's hands trembled as he gripped the microphone. "Sarah, stay calm. I'm going to help you. Can you tell me how you got there?" "I don't remember," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I was at home, and then I was here. Please, you have to help me. I don't know how much longer I can last." Jake's mind raced as he tried to think of what to do. "Sarah, I'm going to stay with you, okay? Just keep talking to me." There was a long pause, then Sarah's voice returned, weaker this time. "Jake, I think I'm not alone. There's something here with me. I can feel it." Jake's breath caught in his throat. "Sarah, what do you mean? What's there with you?" "I don't know," Sarah whispered, "but it's close. I can feel it breathing." "Jake, please, don't leave me." "I won't," Jake said, his voice trembling. "I'm right here. Sarah, just stay with me." There was another pause, then Sarah's voice returned, faint and distorted. "Jake, I think it's too late. It's here." It's the radio cut off, the static returning. Jake stared at the radio, his heart pounding, his hands trembling. He tried to call out to Sarah, but there was no response. The next day, Jake tried to find out what had happened. He called the police, the radio station, anyone who might know something. But no one had heard of Sarah, and no one could explain the broadcast. That night, Jake sat by the radio, hoping to hear Sarah's voice again, but the radio remained silent, the static cutting through the silence of the night. And then, just as he was about to give up, the radio crackled to life. Jake, Sarah's voice said, faint and distorted, "I'm still here, and I'm not alone." Jake's heart raced as he listened to the voice, the static growing louder, more insistent. He tried to respond, but the radio cut off, the static returning. Jake never heard Sarah's voice again, but he never forgot that night. And sometimes, late at night, he would hear the static, faint but unmistakable, calling him back to the radio, to the last broadcast. The doll was beautiful, its porcelain face, smooth and flawless, its glass eyes sparkling in the light. Emily had found it in the attic, tucked away in a dusty box, filled with forgotten trinkets. She hadn't thought much of it at first, but something about it had called to her. She couldn't explain it, but she felt compelled to keep it. That night, Emily placed the doll on her dresser, its glass eyes staring at her. As she fell asleep, she dreamed of the doll, of its porcelain face, smiling at her, its glass eyes following her every move. When she woke up, the doll was gone. Emily's heart raced as she searched the room, her hands trembling. She found the doll sitting in the corner, its glass eyes staring at her, its porcelain face, smiling. Emily told herself it was just her imagination, but the unease lingered. That night, she placed the doll back on the dresser, but when she woke up,
it was gone again. This time, she found it sitting at the foot of her bed, its glass eyes staring at her, its porcelain face smiling. Emily's hands trembled as she picked up the doll, her heart pounding. She tried to convince herself it was just a prank, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. And then the whispers started. At first, they were faint, barely audible, over the sound of her racing heart. But as the nights passed, they grew louder, more distinct. The whispers were coming from the doll, its porcelain face smiling, its glass eyes staring. "Emily," the doll whispered, its voice a low guttural growl that didn't sound human. "You shouldn't have taken me. Now I'm part of your life." Emily's vision blurred as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. She could feel the doll's presence, like a weight, pressing down on her chest, and the last thing she saw before everything went black was the doll's porcelain face, smiling at her. When Emily woke up, she was alone in the room. The doll was gone, but the whispers lingered in her mind, a constant reminder of what had happened. She never spoke of that night to anyone, but she never went back to the attic. And sometimes, late at night, she would hear the whispers, faint but unmistakable, calling her back to the doll-maker's gift. The house was old, its walls creaking with every step, its floors groaning under the weight of time. Sarah had just moved in, and she was still getting used to the strange noises and the eerie atmosphere. But something about the house felt off, like it was hiding a secret. That's when she found the room. It was hidden behind a bookshelf in the study, its door barely visible in the dim light. Sarah hadn't noticed it at first, but something about the bookshelf had caught her attention. She pushed it aside, revealing a small dusty room. The room was filled with strange objects, old books, dusty jars, and strange symbols carved into the walls. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped inside, her hands trembling. She told herself it was just a storage room, but the unease lingered. That night, Sarah dreamed of the room. She was standing inside it, the strange symbols glowing in the dark, the old books whispering secrets she couldn't understand. When she woke up, she was standing in the room, the bookshelf pushed aside, the door wide open. Sarah's heart raced as she stumbled back, her hands trembling. She tried to convince herself it was just a dream, but the room was real, and the whispers were real. They were faint at first, barely audible, over the sound of her racing heart. But as the nights passed, they grew louder, more distinct. The whispers were coming from the room, from the old books, from the strange symbols on the walls. Sarah's the whispers said, their voices a low guttural growl that didn't sound human. "You shouldn't have found the room, now you're part of it." Sarah's vision blurred as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. She could feel the room's presence, like a weight, pressing down on her chest. And the last thing she saw before everything went black was the strange symbols on the walls, glowing in the dark. When Sarah's woke up, she was alone in the house. The room was gone, but the whispers lingered in her mind, a constant reminder of what had happened. She never spoke of that night to anyone, but she never went back to the study. And sometimes, late at night, she would hear the whispers, faint but unmistakable, calling her back to the room, to the forgotten room.
It was just past midnight when Anna's phone buzzed, waking her from a deep, restless sleep. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the caller ID. It was a number she didn't recognize. No name, just a string of random digits. Confused and groggy, she considered ignoring it, but something compelled her to answer. Maybe it was the fact that she had just moved into her new apartment, and the solitude made her anxious. Or maybe she just needed to hear another voice. "Hello," she said, her voice thick with sleep. There was no response at first, only the sound of static, followed by a deep, uneven breathing. Anna's pulse quickened, her gut instinct telling her something was wrong. She was about to hang up when a voice emerged from the other end, soft but chillingly clear. It wasn't a question, it wasn't a greeting, it was a statement. one that made her feel like her skin was crawling. She sat up straighter in bed, clutching her phone tightly. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice trembling despite herself. There was a long pause, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant noise of the city. Then the voice came again, this time with a cold edge. "You don't remember me, do you?" Anna's mind raced. She didn't recognize the voice, but something about it made her feel uneasy, as if it was someone from her past. She couldn't place it, couldn't connect the dots. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. "I don't know who you are," she said firmly, though she felt a sense of dread creeping over her. The person on the other end of the line laughed, a short, bitter laugh that made Anna's stomach twist. "You should remember me, Anna. I remember you." Suddenly, Anna felt a wave of panic. She wanted to hang up, to end this strange, unsettling conversation, but her fingers felt glued to the phone. She couldn't move. There was something in the way the voice spoke to her, something familiar yet off, that kept her trapped in this strange moment. "I don't know you," Anna repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you remember the fire, Anna?" the voice asked. "The one that killed your family?" The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She froze. Her family, the fire. It had been years since that night, that horrible night when she lost everything. She had been the only one to survive, and the trauma of that night had haunted her ever since. The fire had been ruled an accident, but deep down she had always wondered if there was more to it. Now hearing those words, hearing them on the other end of the phone, it was as if that night was coming back to life. "Who are you?" Anna gasped, panic rising in her chest. "You don't remember, do you?" the voice said, its tone turning colder, darker. "You don't remember me because you were too young, but I remember you, Anna. I remember everything." Anna's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to breathe. She was no longer sure if she was dreaming, or if this was real. She couldn't understand why this person was calling her, why they knew about the fire, why they knew her name. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I want you to remember," the voice replied. "I want you to remember what you did." Anna's mind went blank. What she did? She had no idea what the caller was talking about. The only thing she remembered clearly was the fire, the terrifying images of her parents trapped inside their burning home, the way the smoke had filled her lungs, suffocating her, the heat that had burned her skin as she barely managed to escape. But she had never done anything, had she? The voice on the phone chuckled again, a low, mocking sound. "You really don't remember? How convenient. You've been running from it for so long, haven't you?" "Running from what?" Anna whispered. From the other end of the line, a series of clicks echoed through the receiver, as if the caller was pressing buttons or typing. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating, like something was about to be revealed. Finally, the voice returned, softer now, almost tender. "You should have died that night, Anna. You shouldn't have survived." The words sent a chill down her spine. Her breath hitched in her throat. This wasn't just some prank call. Whoever was on the other end of the line knew far too much about her. They knew about the fire, about her survival, and now they were telling her that she should have died that night. You're lying," Anna said, her voice weak, trying to convince herself more than anyone else. "I'm not lying," the voice replied, its tone calm, almost soothing. "I'm the one who made sure you survived. I saved you." Anna's heart stopped, her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. Who was this person? How could they claim to have saved her? And why were they tormenting her now? "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, barely able to get the words out. "Why are you calling me?"
to remind you," the voice said, "to remind you that I've been watching you all these years. I've been waiting for the moment when you'd finally remember." The room felt colder, darker, as if the walls themselves were closing in around her. The phone in her hand felt heavier, as if it had taken on a life of its own, pulling her deeper into whatever nightmare this was. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the line went silent. Anna waited, holding her breath, expecting the voice to come back. But there was nothing. Not a sound, not a breath, just silence. She sat there for what felt like an eternity, the phone still pressed against her ear. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. She didn't know what to think, what to feel. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a growing sense of dread. She should have called the police, should have done something, but she didn't. She couldn't. She was paralyzed by the terror of it all. The phone buzzed again. This time, when she looked at the screen, it was a message, the same strange number. The text read, "I'm still here, waiting for you to remember. Don't keep me waiting too long. Anna." Story 13. The lurking shadow. Henry had always considered himself a rational man. He prided himself on his ability to think logically, to dismiss the superstitions and fears that so many people seem to cling to. Ghosts, nonsense. Monsters under the bed, ridiculous. He had no time for such things. But when he moved into his new apartment, something began to change. It started with small things, odd noises in the middle of the night, the creak of the floorboards, a tap on the window when there was no one outside. At first he brushed it off as the quirks of an old building, but as the days passed, the occurrences grew more frequent and more disturbing. One night, after a particularly long day at work, Henry was preparing for bed when he saw something out of the corner of his eye. A shadow. It was quick, darting across the hallway, just beyond the reach of the light from his bedroom. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. He told himself it was just his imagination. He was tired, stressed, but that night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. The shadows in his room seemed to stretch unnaturally, twisting and shifting in ways they shouldn't. He pulled the covers tighter around himself, but the sensation of being watched only grew stronger. The next night, the shadow returned. This time it was clearer, more defined. It moved along the walls, its shape tall and menacing, stretching unnaturally. As it slid across the room, Henry's pulse raced. He tried to tell himself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, he knew it wasn't. The shadow didn't stop there. It began to appear more frequently, at all hours of the day and night, lurking just out of his direct line of sight, always in the corner of his vision. It was as if it was waiting for him to notice, to acknowledge its presence, but the moment he did, it would vanish, slipping back into the darkness. Henry couldn't take it any longer. He had to do something. He began researching, looking for any explanation, anything that could explain the strange happenings in his apartment, and that's when he found it. An old legend, a tale of a man who had once lived in the building, a man who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Some said he had been consumed by the shadows. Others whispered that he had become one with them. Henry didn't believe it. Of course, it was just a story. But as the days passed, the shadows grew bolder. They weren't content to linger in the corners anymore. They were following him, watching him. One evening, after an exhausting day, Henry finally reached his breaking point. He walked into the living room, determined to confront whatever it was that had been haunting him. But when he turned on the lights, the room was empty. No shadow, no lurking presence. Relieved, he sat down on the couch, trying to shake off the overwhelming feeling of unease. But then from the corner of his eye, he saw it, a figure. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was a man, a tall, thin figure, with hollow eyes, and a gaping mouth. It moved toward him, its limbs twisting unnaturally. As it approached, Henry tried to scream, but the words caught in his throat. He tried to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He was paralyzed, trapped by the thing he had ignored for so long. And then in the blink of an eye, the figure was gone. The room was empty again, but Henry knew it wasn't over. The shadow was still there, waiting, lurking, just beyond the light, and it was only a matter of time before it would claim him too. Sarah had always been a bit obsessed with her reflection. It wasn't vanity, at least, not in the traditional sense. She didn't spend hours admiring herself or worrying about every little imperfection. No, for Sarah, it was the curiosity of it all, the way the mirror captured her in such perfect stillness, as if time had paused the moment she looked into it. But lately, her reflections had been different. It started subtly. At first it was just a flicker, like her reflection wasn't quite in sync with her movements. She'd reach for something on the counter, and in the mirror she'd see her hand freeze for a split second before continuing the motion. She didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just fatigue, but the oddities continued. One morning Sarah was getting ready for work, brushing her teeth in front of the bathroom mirror, when she noticed something strange. In the reflection, her face was smiling, but Sarah wasn't smiling. She frowned, confused. She watched transfixed, as her reflection's smile grew wider, the expression more sinister. She turned away, trying to shake off the unease that had begun to settle in her chest, but the smile remained. It stayed in the mirror, even when she wasn't looking. Later that night, when she returned home, the feeling intensified. Her reflection had become more erratic, more unsettling. It seemed to do things she didn't, blink when she didn't, move when she stayed still. And then one night, it spoke to her. "You're not supposed to be here," her reflection whispered, its voice cold and hollow. Sarah stumbled backward, her heart racing. The reflection in the mirror was still, but the words hung in the air like a thick fog. She tried to laugh it off. "It's just a trick of the light," she whispered to herself, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Something in that mirror was watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. Then one night, the reflection reached out, slowly, deliberately, its hand pressed against the glass, just as Sarah did in front of the mirror, but then its fingers curled in an unnatural way, as though the reflection were trying to escape. The glass began to crack. The small town of Mill Road had always been a quiet place, a place where the people knew each other, where the local coffee shop served the best cinnamon rolls, and where the most scandalous thing that had ever happened was a neighbor's dog running loose. But the residents knew there was something off about the house on the corner. The house had been abandoned for years, but it was always there, standing in the same spot, a dark shadow looming over the rest of the neighborhood. The house was old, its windows boarded up, and the wooden fence around the yard was slowly decaying. There were rumors, of course. Everyone knew that something wasn't right, but no one ever dared to investigate. For years, the house remained empty, its secrets locked away behind boarded windows and rotting doors. That is, until one fateful night, when Kevin moved to Mill Road. Kevin was young, eager to start a new chapter of his life. After a recent breakup had left him feeling lost, he wasn't sure what drew him to Mill Road, the peace of the town, the quiet life, but it felt like the perfect place to escape the pain of his past. He found a small apartment not far from the abandoned house, and for the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe again. But the house on the corner never left his mind. At night, when he would lie in bed, he would stare out his window at the dark silhouette of the house, wondering what had happened to make it so eerie. It seemed as if the house was watching him, waiting for something. The thought made him uneasy, but it also intrigued him. Was it just his imagination, or was there really something strange about the house? One evening, as Kevin was taking a walk around the neighborhood, he found himself standing in front of the abandoned house. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and rust, and the faintest sound of creaking could be heard from within. The front door, once a sturdy oak, was now hanging crookedly on its hinges. He couldn't resist the urge to step closer. As he neared the front yard, a chill ran down his spine. There was a feeling in the air, a tension that seemed to pull at the very fabric of the night. Kevin couldn't explain it, but he felt like he wasn't alone. The wind whistled through the cracks in the walls, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw a figure standing in the upper window, watching him. But when he blinked, the window was empty. Kevin shook his head, dismissing the thought. He had just been seeing things. But as he walked away, a voice seemed to call his name. It was faint, barely audible, but there it was. Kevin. He stopped dead in his tracks, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no one around. His gaze turned back to the house. It looked the same, silent, dark, abandoned. But then, the door creaked open, just a crack. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. As he stepped closer, unsure of what to do, the door swung open wider, and in the dim light, Kevin could make out the shadow of a figure standing just inside. The figure's face was obscured by the darkness, but Kevin could feel its eyes on him. "Come inside," the voice whispered again. The invitation sent a shiver down his spine. His instinct screamed at him to run, to turn and leave. But something held him there. The curiosity, the pull of the house, was too strong. He stepped inside. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him, and the temperature in the room plummeted. The air grew thick with a suffocating darkness that seemed to press in from every angle. Kevin's breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The house was cold, its floors creaking beneath his feet. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching and twisting like something alive. He turned, searching for the figure, but it was gone. The house was empty, silent, except for the eerie creaks and whispers that echoed through the rooms. Kevin's heart raced as he moved through the house. He passed through rooms filled with broken furniture, shattered glass, and peeling wallpaper. There was an unsettling stillness to it, like time had stopped. But there was something else, something off about the way the house felt. The walls seemed to pulse, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. He reached the staircase at the back of the house, its wooden steps groaning under his weight. As he ascended, the whispering grew louder. It was as if the house itself was speaking to him, urging him to go further, to explore deeper. At the top of the stairs, he found the room. It was small, its walls covered in strange symbols, and in the center of the room was an old wooden chair. But it was the mirror that caught Kevin's attention. It was large, framed in ornate gold, and it stood against the wall, as though it had been placed there deliberately. Kevin felt drawn to it. He stepped closer, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. But as he looked deeper, he saw something else. A figure, standing just behind him, watching him. His heart skipped a beat as he spun around, but the room was empty. The figure in the mirror was still there, though it wasn't his reflection anymore. The face staring back at him was pale and hollow, its eyes black as coal, its mouth twisted into a grin. And then the figure spoke. "Welcome home, Kevin." A cold hand gripped his shoulder from behind, and Kevin screamed, spinning around. But there was no one there. The mirror began to crack,